I moved to Charleston to disappear. My ex-wife Denise married her new man 19 days after the ink dried on our divorce. She called him a genius. She called him a real estate mogul. My own daughter Keisha looked me dead in my face and told me she'd asked him to walk her down the aisle because she finally had a father who understood what it meant to build something. They thought I was done. They thought I was just a retired transit mechanic living off a pension check and a bad knee. They were wrong. At that wedding, one woman stood up mid-toast and said a single sentence that made Denise's whole body go rigid. And at 1:47 in the morning, my phone rang. But before I tell you how that night ended, let me take you back to where it started. Because you need to understand what 41 years of marriage looks like when somebody decides it's worth less than a rental car. My name is Walter Freeman. I'm 68 years old, and for 36 years I kept the trains running underneath the city of Philadelphia. I worked third rail, signal systems, brake assemblies, the kind of work where if you mess up, people die. So you learn not to mess up. If you've ever given everything you had to people who only saw you as a paycheck, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me what city you're listening from, because I read every comment. Family. It was 91 degrees the day the judge signed our decree, and I remember the courthouse steps burned right through the soles of my shoes. I was holding my car keys, a paid-off Buick Enclave, nothing fancy, but it was mine, bought with double shifts and a busted shoulder I never had fixed, because I couldn't afford to take the time off. Denise walked up beside me in heels she couldn't have afforded on her own salary, and held out her hand. "Give me the fob, Walter." Not a question. Judge gave me the car. Goes with the condo, and 65% of the retirement account. You don't need an SUV to get to the pharmacy. I looked at her. 41 years, and she couldn't even look me in the eye when she said it. "I rebuilt that transmission myself, Denise. You've never checked the oil in your life." She laughed the way she'd started laughing the last 2 years sharp, like she was performing for somebody watching from a balcony. "That's the difference between us, Walter. You fix things. Marcus builds things. He doesn't get his hands dirty, and that's exactly why he's somebody." Marcus. The name landed like a hot coal in my chest. 6 months she'd been seeing him before she told me, and by the time she told me, she'd already picked out which of my tools she was donating to Goodwill. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper, dropped it in my palm like she was doing me a favor. A SEPTA transit pass, $30 loaded on it. "So you're not stranded," she said. "I know how you like your routine." I looked down at that transit pass 36 years. I kept those trains safe for this city, and my own wife handed me a fare card like I was a stranger, asking for change on the platform. I folded it into my jacket pocket without a word. That's when my daughter came around the corner, carrying a box of Denise's things to load into a car that wasn't the Buick. A black Escalade with temp tags, engine running, a man in mirrored sunglasses leaning against the hood like he owned the block. "Keisha," I said, "you want to get dinner tonight? I want to talk about—" She didn't let me finish. Didn't even set the box down. "Can't, Dad. Marcus is taking us to Butcher and Rye. He's celebrating a closing." She paused, glanced at her mother, then back at me with something in her eyes I hadn't seen since she was 17, and ashamed of the car I picked her up in from school. "Look, Dad, you did what you could. But the world's different now. Marcus is teaching me about equity, about building real wealth. You worked yourself half to death for a pension that barely covers your light bill." "He's a good man," Denise called from the Escalade, window down. "Finally, somebody who can take care of this family the way it deserves." "Take care?" I said, and something cracked in my chest that I didn't let show on my face. "I paid for your nursing degree, Keisha. I paid off this man's what has he even done for this family in 8 months that I didn't do in 26 years. She looked at her shoes. $200 shoes I didn't buy. "He's just further along than you ever got, Dad." "Don't make this ugly." She got in the Escalade. Didn't look back through the tinted glass. I stood on that sidewalk with a transit pass in one hand and a suitcase in the other, and I understood something in that moment that took me an hour to fully accept. I hadn't just lost a marriage. I'd lost a daughter somewhere along the way, and I'd been too busy working overtime to notice the exit she'd already taken. Most men would have gone and gotten drunk. I went and sat on the bus bench instead. I am not most men. 36 years underground taught me one thing above everything else. When a system fails, you don't grieve it. You isolate the fault and reroute the power. I called my financial advisor, a man named Curtis Bellamy, I'd trusted since 1994. Walter, everything all right with the hearing? Liquidate it, I said. Everything that isn't already cash. The land my father left me down in Georgetown County. The bond ladder. All of it. Today. Long pause on his end. That's a serious move, Walter. You sure? I've never been sure of anything in my life, Curtis. Wire it to the account we opened last spring. The one Denise doesn't know exists. Where are you headed? Charleston, I said, watching a city bus groan to a stop in front of me, doors folding open. Tonight. What Denise and Keisha didn't know, what they never bothered to ask about in 26 years, was the patent. Back in 2003, I'd designed a fail-safe braking sensor for course, after watching too many near misses on the Broad Street line. Nobody wanted it then. Too expensive to retrofit, they said. I filed the patent anyway and let it sit, because that's what an engineer does. You build the thing that's right, even if the world isn't ready yet. They thought they'd strip me down to the bone. They didn't know the world had finally caught up to what I built 20 years ago. 6 months is long enough to learn that silence isn't empty. It's full. In Charleston, my morning started with black coffee on a piazza overlooking the harbor, the only sound, the gulls, and a shrimp boat engine somewhere out past the marsh. My neighbors thought I was a retired city worker living modestly on Social Security. Mrs. Odom next door brought me cornbread every other Sunday and called me the quiet gentleman. She had no idea the man eating her cornbread held the exclusive licensing rights on a braking system, now mandated on every new transit line being built on the East Coast, and that every time a train slowed down safely in Atlanta or Baltimore, a fraction of a cent landed in an account Denise never knew I had. Then my phone rang on that piazza table, and Keisha's name lit up the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail. I'd talked to her exactly once since Philadelphia, a 2-line text confirming I'd landed safe. She never replied. Why call now? I answered anyway. A logical man gathers data before he decides anything. Keisha. Dad? Is that you sound different? It's me. Everything all right? Yeah, great. Actually amazing. She was talking too fast, and I could hear glasses clinking, a room full of people behind her. We're at the club. Marcus just bought a round for the whole membership floor. Anyway, Dad, I'm calling because the wedding's set. Next month. Next month? The divorce had been final 6 months. That's a fast timeline for a man who just met your mother. When it's right, Dad. Marcus doesn't sit around waiting on things. He makes moves. A dig, wrapped in a compliment for somebody else. The venue, she said, bragging now. Some ballroom downtown. 400 guests. Stone crab flown in from Florida. Then the phone shuffled, and a new voice came on, tight and syrupy. Hey there, Walter. My son-in-law's soon-to-be second wife. No, wait. I mean Keisha's husband, Andre's mother, Sharon, a woman who'd once told me my church suit looked budget. We just wanted you to know, gently, that you really don't need to fly down for this. A ticket from Philly's expensive, and honestly, Marcus has invited some very important people. Council members, a couple NFL guys. Might be uncomfortable for you. So you're uninviting me? I said, calm. We're saving you the embarrassment, Sharon said, and letting you know Marcus is going to walk Keisha in when she renews her vows next year. He's stepping in as the family patriarch. We just didn't want you showing up and making a scene. Click. Dial tone. I set the phone down slow. Replaced. Embarrassment. Fixed income. I sat with that a long while, stripping the insults away to look at the data underneath, the way I used to trace a fault down a signal line instead of chasing the symptom. If they were truly this happy, if Marcus was truly this successful, why call it all? Why go out of their way, long distance, to make sure I stayed home? Fear. That was the signal buried in all that noise. People who are secure don't spend a phone call convincing a man they've already dismissed to stay dismissed. And then I remembered something. 22 years back, when I redid the electrical and structural bracing on that Germantown row house we used to own, the one Denise got in the settlement, I'd filed a contractor's lien on the property to protect myself from liability, and never released it because nobody ever asked me to. If Marcus was leveraging that house for capital, that lien would surface, and they hadn't come asking for my signature, which meant either they didn't know or they were about to try something they shouldn't. I opened the airline app. Sharon figured I'd be counting nickels for a coach ticket. I booked first class, one way, out of Charleston the next morning. They wanted a ghost at that wedding? I was going to give them a haunting. Philadelphia International smells like jet fuel and second chances if you've spent your life working underneath it. I walked through arrivals not as the broken man who'd left 6 months prior, but 20 pounds lighter, back straight, wearing a suit tailored in Charleston by a man who used to dress state senators. I wasn't looking for a fight. I was looking for information. That's when I heard her voice at the curb, Denise, in a coat too heavy for the weather, checking her reflection in a compact mirror like she was bracing for cameras. 3 new suitcases around her feet. And then the cars pulled up. Not one. 3 black SUVs boxing in a silver Rolls-Royce Cullinan, and out stepped Marcus, arms thrown wide like he was auditioning for something. "There's my future," he bellowed, loud enough for strangers to stop and stare, wondering if he was somebody famous. I stood behind a pillar and watched. I wasn't looking at his teeth or his watch. I was looking at the rear plate frame on that Rolls, small print at the bottom corner, a rental agency out of North Philly that I knew personally, because I'd rewired their security system after a break-in 3 years back. I knew their fleet. I knew their rates. Real money doesn't come with a rental sticker on the frame. Real money owns the car outright or has a driver who does. I got in a cab. Wells Fargo on Chestnut, I told the driver. I didn't go to a hotel first. I went straight to the money. Arthur Combs had managed my accounts for 20 years, since we played ball together at Overbrook High. He dropped his pen when I walked into his office. "Walter, thought you were gone for good. I need to see my file, Arthur, and ask you something about the Germantown property." His smile faded fast. "This? About the recent activity?" "What activity?" He turned his monitor toward me. 2 weeks ago, Denise took out a home equity line against that house. A big one. 410,000 cash. The room went quiet, except for the hum of a server somewhere down the hall. 410,000 money I'd built into that house brick by brick, wire by wire, over 3 decades. Why would she need that kind of liquidity? She's got half my retirement and alimony. Arthur lowered his voice. She came in with him, Walter. He did all the talking. Told the loan officer he needed bridge capital for a real estate fund, buildings in Atlanta, opportunity zones, all the buzzwords. Said he'd triple her money in 90 days. Said he loved her too much not to let her in on the ground floor. He's supposedly worth 8 figures, I said. Why does a man like that need his fiancé's home equity for bridge capital? Exactly what I thought, Arthur said. We ran a soft check. Walter, the man's a ghost. LLC out of Delaware. No banking relationship with anybody local. Money moves through him, never sits still. I stood up slow. My hands weren't shaking from fear. They were shaking from the size of the stupidity I was witnessing. They'd called me small, called me cheap, and they'd handed the keys to their whole future to a man who didn't even own the car he pulled up in. It's legal, Walter, Arthur said. She signed willingly. You can't stop it. I'm not trying to stop it, Arthur, I said, buttoning my jacket. I'm making sure that when the lights go out on this thing, I'm the only one holding a flashlight. The rehearsal dinner was at a steakhouse on Rittenhouse Square, the kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices, and the waiters look at you like you owe them an apology just for asking. I showed up anyway, 5 minutes late, and the maitre d' nearly turned me away until I said I was with the Devereaux party. They were seated in a private alcove, Denise in a dress, too young for the occasion, Keisha nursing a cocktail, Andre scrolling his phone, and Marcus at the head of the table, arms spread along the booth like he owned the restaurant. Walter, he boomed, standing halfway, no handshake offered. Didn't think you'd actually make the trip. 36 years on the third rail, Marcus. A flight from Charleston isn't exactly a hardship. Sharon looked me up and down. Is that what you're wearing to the wedding, Walter? Looks a little plain. We really wanted this black tie. Custom made, I said. In Charleston. I prefer fit over flash. Marcus laughed and waved the sommelier over. Bring my friend here a taste of the 95 Bordeaux. Probably drinks the box stuff at home. This'll educate the palate. I swirled the glass they poured me, held it to the light. Color was off too brown at the rim for a wine that age. I took a sniff, corked, turned, tasted like wet cardboard, and he was too busy performing to notice his own bottle had gone bad. Distinct, I said. Suits you. He didn't catch it, clapped his hands, ordered it poured for the whole table. We're celebrating. I just closed a fund round for my new venture. Andre's going to run operations for me. I looked at my son-in-law. Andre had a steady job in facilities management at a hospital union. Benefits, a pension of his own coming. You're leaving Jefferson for this? Dad, unions are for people who don't believe in themselves, Andre said, and I watched Keisha nod along like he'd said something wise. Marcus paid off Andre's truck note last week, Denise added, beaming. Did you see the receipt, or did he just say he did it? I asked her, and she snapped at me for being negative, for never being able to just be happy that her daughter finally had a father figure who knew how to win. Keisha cleared her throat and reached into her clutch, pulled out a small velvet box. Didn't open it. Dad, there's something I need to tell you about the ceremony. Marcus paid for the venue. He's been more of a father to me in 8 months than... She stopped herself, but not soon enough. He's going to walk me down the aisle. Give the toast. And where do I sit? Sharon smiled, cruel and syrupy. We've got you at a table in the back, Walter, near my great-aunt Odessa. She's about 90, hard of hearing. We didn't want to pressure you into speeches. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and raised my water glass. To the bride, I said, looking at Keisha, may your equity be worth more than your loyalty. I turned to Marcus. And to the man of the hour, I hope your wallet's as thick as your mouth, because carrying this family gets heavier than it looks. His smile flickered. What's that supposed to mean? Enjoy your dinner, I said, and walked out, but I didn't leave. I waited by the coat check, watched through the glass as the bill came, watched Marcus toss down a black card with a flourish, watched the waiter swipe it, frown, swipe it again, walked to the register phone, watched Marcus's neck flush red as he pulled out a second card, declined, a third, declined. The manager started walking over. That was the first crack in the dam. The wedding was held at a converted rice mill on the Ashley River, decorated in so many white orchids it smelled like a perfume counter, a 20-piece orchestra, ice sculptures. I sat where they placed me back corner, near the kitchen doors, beside a woman named Odessa, who thought the whole event was a church bazaar. Before the ceremony, I'd made one call to an old friend from my block, Reggie Vaughn, who ran fraud investigations for one of the biggest underwriters on the East Coast. I'd sent him a photo I took of Marcus at the rehearsal and a simple message, run his face, something's not right. Reggie wrote back, within hours, give me a day. If he's who I think he is, stand clear of the blast radius. During the vows, I watched Marcus sweat through a suit that cost more than my first car, checking his phone every 30 seconds like a man waiting on a verdict. I read his lips when he leaned into Keisha at the altar, not, I love you. He said, did the transfer clear? She whispered back that she'd given him the code already. At the reception, a woman I didn't recognize sat alone at the head table, tall, sharp-suited, drinking soda water with lime, watching everything with the stillness of somebody counting down a clock. When I sat beside her at the bar, she didn't blink. You're the ex-husband, she said. The engineer. Mechanic, I corrected. Transit systems. You're the only person in this room who isn't drowning, she said. You just don't know it yet. She told me her name was Detective Carla Renfro, private investigator out of Jacksonville, on retainer for a woman named Yolanda Devereaux, who'd been legally married to the man calling himself Marcus for 11 years and had 3 children with him in Florida before he vanished with her savings 8 months ago. He's not selling real estate, she said. There's no fund. There's a bank account in the Caymans and a rented Rolls, and he uses each new Mark's money to pay off the last one he burned. I asked her why she hadn't stopped it already. Because you don't stop the flood before people see the water rising with their own eyes, she said. Otherwise, they just blame you for it. Dinner ended. The lights dimmed. Andre stood at the microphone to give his toast, calling Marcus the father I never had, calling me with a vague wave toward my table. A good man, but a man of the old world. A man who fixes what's broken, but never learned how to build something new. The room applauded. I sat with my hands folded, and I let them. At the exact moment, Andre raised his glass to toast. The future. A future where we don't count pennies. The entire ballroom went dark. Not a flicker. A total engineered blackout. The kind that comes from somebody cutting a circuit at the source, not the grid failing on its own. I knew that sound. I'd caused it enough times myself, decades back, when a system needed to be shut down before somebody got hurt. Emergency lights kicked on, harsh and blue-white, and the resort's general manager walked straight up to the head table holding a payment terminal. "Mr. Devereaux," he said, voice amplified straight through the still live microphone Marcus had forgotten to release. "We have a problem with your second deposit. All 3 cards on file were declined. 2 were flagged as reported stolen out of Jacksonville, Florida." 500 people went silent at once. Marcus tried to laugh it off, tried to hand it to Denise, told her to give the manager her card, that his funds were tied up overseas. Denise stood, swaying, her face going the color of the tablecloth. "I don't have it, Marcus. You told me you needed the liquid capital by morning. I gave you everything, the house money, my 401k, all of it." "Liar," Andre shouted, standing so fast he knocked his chair over. "You told me the fund was liquid. You made me sign the papers on my mother's trust an hour ago. I'd known that was coming." 2 nights before, Andre had shown up at my hotel room past 11, demanding I release the small education trust I'd set up years back for grandchildren who didn't exist yet, threatening to have me declared incompetent if I refused. I'd signed it after adding a clause in the margin that froze the principal until a beneficiary who didn't exist turned 18. He never read it. He just wanted the signature. Detective Renfro stood, walked to the front, and told the room who she really worked for, who Marcus Devereaux really was, a man named Marcus Devereaux, married for 11 years to a woman in Jacksonville with 3 children, wanted for defrauding retirees out of nearly $2 million across 4 states. Denise collapsed into her chair. Andre stood frozen, staring at Marcus like the floor had opened beneath him. Marcus bolted for the kitchen exit, found it locked, spun around to find 4 police officers walking through the front doors he'd never expected to see that night. They put him on the ground in front of everybody he'd spent 8 months trying to impress. "Checkmate," I said, raising my water glass, and I meant for him to hear it. At 1:47 that morning, my phone rang in my hotel room. Denise's name on the screen. I let it ring twice before I answered. "Walter." Her voice was wrecked, wind howling somewhere behind her. "They kicked us out. They sealed the room a crime scene," they said. "I have nowhere to go." Andre's outside on his suitcase. They took his passport. "Walter, they think he's involved. They're going to charge him." "He's a grown man, Denise. He wanted to be a businessman. This is business." "Don't be cruel. Not now. We have 41 years, Walter. That ceremony was fake. That means we're still us." I let the silence stretch. "We are not us, Denise. We haven't been us in a long while." "I heard what you said at that table," she whispered. 8 million. I heard the number, Walter. You can fix this. Pay off the hotel. Get Andre a lawyer. Come get me. 8 months back, a transit authority up in New York had licensed my braking patent for their new light rail expansion. $8 million, deposited the week before that wedding, while she was choosing centerpieces for a man who'd never once asked me a single question about my life's work. "You're calling the wrong man, Denise," I said. "Call the public defender's office in the morning. Save your battery." And I hung up, gentle, not angry, just done. The next morning, my suitcase packed. I nearly walked past them in the hotel lobby, Andre in yesterday's clothes, no shoes, and Keisha, mascara down her face, throwing herself at my arm before I even reached the doors. "Dad, please, we have nowhere to go. We're so sorry." "I'm Dad. I'm pregnant. 6 weeks. That's why we were desperate. We were building something for your grandchild." I looked at her flat stomach, remembered her doing shots on the yacht 2 nights prior, and said nothing about it. "What is it you want, Keisha? Buy the house back before the bank takes it. We can all live there again. You, me, Andre, the baby." I did the math out loud. The way I'd been trained to for 36 years, appraised value against the debt, against the market, showed her it wasn't a gift. It was $1 million hole. She called me cruel, called me a bitter old man hoarding money while his family suffered. I'm not hoarding it, I told her. I'm protecting it from people who think tears are currency. I turned to walk to the shuttle, and Andre shouted after me that I was bluffing, that a transit mechanic on a pension couldn't have that kind of money, that I was just trying to hurt them. I stopped, pulled a business card from my coat, a transit authority letterhead, a wire confirmation on the back, dated the day before. 8 million. I told him, cash, post-divorce income. Your mother gets nothing. You get nothing. Denise, who'd just come through the revolving doors behind them, heard the number and went down like a dropped marionette, straight onto the marble floor. I got on the shuttle. Andre ran alongside it, pounding the glass, until I told the driver to open the door one more time. Andre climbed up, collapsed at my feet, begged for $1 million, just $1 million, said he'd learned real principles from Marcus, even if the man was a fraud. I handed him an envelope, not a check, a one-way bus ticket to Pittsburgh, and a list of staffing agencies that hire warehouse labor. No resume required. This is your future if you want one. I told him. Calluses will teach you what respect feels like. He begged. I let the doors close anyway, watched him shrink in the side mirror, alone on that curb, holding a bus ticket like it was the only truth left in his hand. Back in Charleston, I opened the terrace doors and let the harbor air in. Mrs. Odom's cornbread was still warm on the counter. I poured a $20 bottle of red instead of anything with a name I couldn't pronounce, and I sat with it as the sky went the color of a bruise healing. Reggie sent one last update a few weeks later. Denise was working the greeter counter at a department store she used to shop in like it owed her something. Marcus Deverall was being held without bail, federal charges stacking up across 4 states, 20 years on the low end. Andre was in Pittsburgh, working nights at a distribution center, sharing a room with 2 other men, taking the bus to work same as I once did. I don't wish them harm. I wish them the life they built for themselves, and I wish myself the peace I finally paid full price for. 41 years taught me that loyalty was never about blood. It's about character. And once you sell your dignity chasing somebody else's shine, you don't get to buy it back at any price. Invest in yourself, family. It's the only thing that never depreciates. Thank you for sitting with my story tonight. If you've ever had to walk away from people who only loved what you could give them, hit that like button. It tells me you're still out there listening. Subscribe if you want more stories about quiet men who turn out to be the loudest ones in the room when it counts. Tell me in the comments, would you have given Andre that money? Or did I do the right thing sending him to Pittsburgh? I read every single one. See you in the next story, family. You know, the money was never really the point, family. What mattered was that Walter never stopped being decent even after decent people gave up on him. Real worth isn't proven by what you flash, it's proven by what you quietly keep building while nobody's watching. Protect your peace, work with your hands and your heart, and let your character speak long after the applause for somebody else's shine has faded. A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI purely for entertainment, though we hope its lesson about quiet dignity stays with you long after the tale ends.